Hello. The Union of the Crowns in 1603, when James VI of Scotland acceded to the throne of England as James I, marked the beginning of a single British navy. Peace with Spain followed. Despite an ever-present threat to merchant shipping and repeated attacks on Channel and East Coast ports by pirates, a depleted treasury meant economies were made. Under James, the navy was downsized. Several ships were taken out of commission and their crews stood down. For those men remaining in service, pay was low and frequently late. As a result, corruption was widespread. To pay for improvements, Charles I reintroduced a supposedly hypothecated tax known as ship money, a tax that had been levied from coastal areas by late medieval kings without parliamentary approval in order to help pay for their protection in times of war. In 1628, with Parliament prorogued, Charles reinstated the tax, initially applicable only in maritime counties, but soon extended to inland shires. Assessment was based on annual income and the value of property held, and was collected by county sheriffs. Not only was the tax unpopular, but in peacetime its legality was questionable. John Hampden, a prominent member of Parliament and Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Buckinghamshire, refused to pay, and a 7-month test case followed before 12 judges in the Exchequer Court. A majority decision by 7-5 found in the King's favour, but the narrow margin encouraged further non-payers. In the meantime, new ships were commissioned to designs by shipwright Phineas Pett, including the Prince Royal, built by Phineas and his son Peter at Woolwich, the Navy's first 3-deck warship, armed with 55 guns, and the largest sovereign of the seas equipped with 100 guns, built at Chatham. Over time, the strengthened fleet had an impact on reducing piracy, then rife in the English Channel, but a lack of transparency about how the ship money was being spent led to questions and a difficulty with non-payment. A decade after it was introduced, less than 20% of the tax demand was being collected. In 1640, the tax was outlawed by Parliament. The imposition of ship money without parliamentary approval was one of the grievances that contributed to the Civil War. When that conflict began in 1642, 35 of 39 King's ships then in service declared for Parliament. For some, it may have been a question of principle, but many crews were owed months of pay arrears. Captains had resorted to selling off fittings to pay for provisions. Parliament promised to pay on time, and did so. The role of the Navy in the defeat of the Royalist cause has been seriously underestimated. If the Navy had remained loyal to Charles, it is highly unlikely the London merchants would have dared to back Parliament. They would have faced ruin from a naval blockade. And it was the Navy's ships that ensured resources could be delivered safely, while preventing Royalist supplies reaching their destination, and making sure French troops were unable to cross the Channel to support Charles's cause. After the Civil War ended, the few ships remaining loyal to the Crown came under the command of Prince Rupert, Cavalier turned sea captain. They were soon dispersed. Not only did the Parliamentarians create the new model army, during the period of the Commonwealth there was effectively a new model navy as well. The King's 39 ships soon became a fleet of 246. Cromwell's aim was to challenge the Dutch, who had established a significant control of maritime trade, including the highly profitable spice trade. Finding crews for these new vessels was a problem. Several British sailors had signed on with the Dutch when James I had run down his fleet. To attract experienced seamen, substantial improvements were made to pay and conditions. Ordinary seamen were to receive 19 shillings a month, roughly equivalent to a labourer's wage on land, but with board and keep on top. Able seamen were to be paid 24 shillings a month, plus board and keep. Rations were improved. Meat, fish, bread and a gallon of beer a day. Formal recognition and extension of the right to prize money was introduced, and a commission set up to consider the question of pensions. An Act of 1651 banned foreign ships from English colonial trade. The Dutch refused to accept any English monopoly, and the First Anglo-Dutch War followed. In 1652, a naval victory over an English fleet off the coast of Dungeness gave the Dutch temporary control of the Channel. A questionable story spread that the Dutch Admiral Martin Tromp had a broom tied to the masthead of his ship as a sign he would sweep his enemies from the sea. The defeat led to reforms, giving admirals greater decision-making control in combat conditions. These were set out in sailing and fighting instructions issued by the Lords Commissioners of the Admiralty in 1653, containing regulations governing conduct in battle. In essence, the first Articles of War. By the conclusion of hostilities a year later, 5 major defeats had been inflicted on the Dutch, and Britain had established its place on the stage of world trade. Jamaica was captured from Spain in 1655. A shortage of experienced seamen extended to high command. The answer was the appointment of soldiers, generals at sea, used to giving orders, experienced in battle, and importantly, familiar with gunnery. Among those appointed was General George Monk, who would play an instrumental role in the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. Under Charles II, the fleet officially becomes the Royal Navy, but for the first time, the ships were no longer the King's personal property. I'll pick up on the implications of that next time. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe buttons and click on the notification bell to be informed when the next video is available, or you can subscribe by clicking on the rose window over my shoulder.